Let's be honest for a moment. Growing older isn't just about the changes in our bodies or how we move through the world. It's also about how relationships shift, especially with the people we once thought would always be close. And for many of us after 65, that shift is quiet, subtle, and at times heartbreaking. You see, something strange happens when you reach a certain age. You start realizing that the people you raised, the ones you sacrificed so much for, the ones you thought would always understand you, don't. Not really. And it stings. It's not that they don't care. It's that the connection, the understanding, the closeness you expected, starts to feel one-sided. Today, I want to say something that might be hard to hear at first, but could save you from years of quiet disappointment. After 65, stop expecting certain things from your family. Not because they're bad people, not because you're not important, but because holding on to these silent hopes will only break your heart. And you deserve better than that. Let's start with the first expectation that so many of us carry deep in our hearts, expecting them to always understand us. This one is sneaky. We don't even say it out loud most of the time, but we feel it. We hope that our children, our grandchildren, our relatives will get where we're coming from, that they'll listen and hear us, that they'll relate to our worries, our joys, our past. But here's the truth. You grew up in a different world. A world of handwritten letters, rotary phones, neighbors who knew your name, and values built on patience, sacrifice, and community. Today's world moves fast. Too fast. It's noisy, digital, rushed. And the generations that came after us, they were shaped by that pace. Their priorities feel different. Their attention is split 100 ways. And sometimes, when you speak to them from your heart, it's like your words are landing in a different language. Let me tell you a story. A gentleman named Charles, 72 years old, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "I tried to talk to my son about how I'm feeling lately, about how I miss the old neighborhood, how my friends are passing away, how I feel invisible sometimes." He nodded, said, "That sucks, Dad," and then changed the subject. I felt like I was speaking to a wall. And the worst part? Charles wasn't angry. He was just deeply disappointed. Because he expected his son to understand, to really listen, to meet him where he was emotionally. But that's the trap, isn't it? We think that because they're family, they should understand us, that they should be able to read between the lines, to feel our fears and joys like we felt theirs when they were young. But they don't. Not always. Not in the way we hope. And I want to be clear, this doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you failed as a parent or that they don't love you. It just means that life has taken them down a different path. One filled with distractions, stress, their own challenges. And sometimes, your words become background noise to their busy lives. So, what do we do with that? We stop expecting full understanding from people who aren't in our shoes. We stop holding out for validation from those who, through no fault of their own, simply can't see the whole picture of our lives. And we start finding peace in expressing ourselves anyway, without needing them to fully get it. Because here's the beautiful truth. You don't need to be understood to be valid. You don't need someone to get your emotions for those emotions to be real. You've lived through decades of change, loss, love, and reinvention. You've built wisdom through experience. And that wisdom doesn't require applause or approval. It simply is. Sometimes we speak not to be understood, but to stay connected to ourselves, to keep the fire in our hearts alive. If someone hears it and understands, even a little, wonderful. But if not, it doesn't diminish your truth. There's a kind of quiet strength in learning to be at peace even when others don't see the full you. In learning to express, not to impress, to share, not to convince. And when you release the pressure for others to fully get you, something surprising happens. The loneliness starts to lift. Not because people have changed, but because your expectations have. You start to surround yourself with people who do understand, even if they're not family. Fellow seniors, a kind neighbor, a friend from church or the community center, people who are walking a similar path, who share your rhythm, who laugh at the same memories and understand the silence that follows certain stories. You also start to hear your own voice again, the one you silenced every time you felt ignored, the one that says, "I still matter," even if no one's clapping. So if you've been carrying that quiet pain, the feeling of being misunderstood, dismissed, or unseen by the people you thought would always get you, just know this: you are not alone. And you don't have to keep expecting something that leaves you feeling empty. You can speak anyway. You can love anyway. And you can build a new kind of connection, one that doesn't depend on being fully understood, but on being fully true to yourself. Next, the second expectation that you need to stop from your family is thinking your family will always be there when you need them most. That one hurts, but facing it gently can save your heart from a lot of future disappointment. You might not say it out loud, but deep down, you probably hoped your children or close family would show up when life got hard, when your health took a turn, when the house felt too big and the nights too long, when you sat quietly at the table staring into your tea and just wanted someone to ask how you're really doing. And for some of us, they do show up sometimes. But for many others, they don't. At least not in the way we expected. Take Ruth, 68. She told me something that stayed with me. A few months ago, she slipped in her kitchen and fractured her hip. She called her daughter, who lives 3 hours away, to let her know she'd be in the hospital for a few days. Her daughter said, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'll try to come when I can, but the kids have school and work's been crazy." Ruth hung up and stared at the ceiling in that hospital bed, thinking to herself, when did I stop being the emergency? That's the heartbreak. We remember all the times we dropped everything for them when they were sick, scared, or struggling. We remember the late nights and early mornings, the sacrifices, the worry, the love. And when life circles back and it's our turn to need help, we assume, deep down, that they'll be there. Because we were. But here's the quiet truth. Life doesn't always return the favor the way we imagined. People are busy, distracted, stressed, caught up in their own problems, their own marriages, their own health, their own exhaustion. And sometimes we simply fall off their radar, not out of cruelty, but because the pace of their life is pulling them in every direction but toward us. And that stings. It really does. Especially when you're vulnerable, when you're in pain or scared or even just lonely. It makes you feel like you don't matter anymore, like your season of importance has passed. But here's what I want you to know. Your value does not depend on whether they show up. And your emotional survival can't hang on the hope that they always will. I'm not saying give up on your family. I'm saying stop expecting them to be your only safety net. Because if you do, every time they don't come through, it chips away at your spirit. And you deserve better than that. You deserve strength that doesn't crumble when others are absent. This is where your own support system becomes everything. I know it sounds unfair. You might be thinking, at my age, I shouldn't have to rebuild a village. But you can, and you must. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Start with small, steady steps. Get to know your neighbors. Join a group, even if it's just a walking club or a local book circle. Talk to the person at the front desk of your building or senior center. Go where people notice when you're missing. Build relationships that are based not on blood, but on consistency. Sometimes, it's the woman who sits near you in church who ends up being the one who brings you soup when you're ill. Sometimes, it's a former coworker who checks in more often than your own children do. And that's okay. In fact, it's beautiful. Because chosen support is just as sacred as family support. And don't forget, you are allowed to be your own anchor too. You are still capable. You've survived this long not by accident, but by resilience. You've figured things out before. You've endured grief, changes, and isolation. So even when no one's rushing to your side, you are not powerless. It helps to reframe what being there really means. Instead of expecting someone to show up physically every time something goes wrong, maybe you lean into the people who send a kind message, who pick up the phone, who offer their ears even if they can't offer their hands. Presence comes in many forms. And sometimes, recognizing the small gestures, no matter how imperfect, keeps your heart from hardening. Of course, this doesn't mean you stop feeling hurt. The pain is real, and grieving the emotional distance between you and your family is valid. Sometimes it helps to write it out. Not to send, not to share, but just to process. I wish you had come. I felt forgotten. I missed you when I needed you most. Give those feelings space, then let them breathe. Because here's the deeper truth. You are not broken because someone didn't show up. You are still whole, still worthy, still here. We live in a time when older adults are too often seen as optional, as background noise. But your life is still loud. Your voice still matters. And every time you find a way to stand strong, even if it's quietly, even if it's in solitude, you reclaim your power. So if you're sitting in a house that once rang with the noise of children, but now feels too quiet, if you're healing from something and wondering why no one checked in, if you're holding the phone, staring at the screen, hoping for a message that never came, just know this. Your story doesn't end here. And you are not defined by who shows up when things fall apart. You are defined by how you rise, how you love, how you rebuild, even in the silence. You don't have to expect the world from your family. You just have to give the world to yourself, in the ways that matter most. Next, the third expectation that quietly sits in so many hearts after 65, expecting them to change and finally treat you better someday. Now, this one can be hard to admit even to yourself. You might think you've let go of the hope, but deep down, you're still waiting for a softer tone, a warmer visit, maybe even an apology that never came. You're still holding on to the dream that one day, your adult child will finally see you clearly, see your sacrifices, your pain, your love, and treat you the way you always hoped they would. But year after year, the same patterns repeat. They're cold, dismissive, quick to criticize, or quick to disappear. And still, part of you whispers, maybe one day they'll come around. It's understandable. We're human. We crave resolution, especially with the people we've given so much of ourselves to. We think if we wait long enough, if we love hard enough, if we're patient just a little more, they'll change. But the truth? Most of the time, they don't. People grow up with their own stories, their own wounds, their own blind spots. And even if you know the story they've written about you isn't fair or true, you can't force them to rewrite it. You can't control how someone sees you, not even your own children. And trying to will only drain you. Let me share something with you. There's a woman I know, Joanne, 70, who spent nearly 20 years hoping her daughter would finally reach out with softness. Every birthday, every Christmas, every hospital visit, she hoped that this would be the time her daughter would call, or come by, or say something kind. But each time, it was silence. Or worse, another cold message. Joanne kept telling herself, maybe next year. But one day, she woke up and realized she'd spent the better part of her retirement hoping for a version of her daughter that didn't exist. Not because her daughter was evil, but because she had chosen a different path, one that didn't include repairing that bond. Joanne said, I wasted so many good years sitting in grief. I should have been dancing, traveling, laughing. And that's the key. Waiting for someone to change is like holding your breath underwater. Eventually, you have to come up for air. Otherwise, you drown. So if you've been waiting for kinder words, for more visits, for healing that never seems to come, maybe it's time to stop looking for transformation in someone else and start creating it inside yourself. Maybe the healing you're hoping for begins with accepting what is, instead of what could be. You can forgive without ever hearing the words, I'm sorry. You can let go without anyone giving you permission. You can move forward even if the other person stays exactly where they are. And most importantly, you can start treating yourself the way you wish they would treat you. With gentleness, with kindness, with respect. Now, that brings us to the fourth expectation, the one that's even heavier than the last. It's the belief that after everything you gave your family, they owe you something in return. This one is so deeply rooted, because the truth is, you did give up so much. You gave your time, your money, your health, your dreams. You went without sleep, without comfort, without peace, all for their sake. You put their happiness ahead of yours year after year. And now, you sit here wondering, how can they not see that? How can they not feel like they owe me even just a little bit back? It's not about money usually. It's about presence, respect, gratitude. You want them to visit more, check in more, show some kind of emotional repayment for the lifetime of love you gave. But here's the painful truth. Many children don't fully understand the depth of their parents' sacrifices, not until they're much older. And sometimes, not even then. And if you hold on to the idea that they owe you a certain kind of love, attention, or behavior, you may carry resentment that quietly poisons your peace. The hardest pill to swallow is this. You gave because you wanted to, because you love them, because it was your heart's calling. And now, your peace has to come from that, not from what they give back. Love isn't a debt to be paid back. It's a gift that came from your soul. You didn't love them so they'd return the favor. You loved them because that's who you are. That's what parents do. You showed up again and again because that's your strength, not a weakness. But don't mistake letting go of the expectation for letting yourself be mistreated. No, you still deserve respect. You still deserve boundaries. You still have the right to say, this isn't okay. But don't tie your worth to whether they treat you the way you hope they would. That's a fight that only leads to heartache. Instead, find your peace in the truth that you already gave your best. You already poured love into the world. And now, it's time to pour some back into yourself. Buy the flowers for your table. Take yourself to the cafe. Laugh with your friends. Join the class. Say yes to joy again. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you've earned it. You've earned a life that isn't spent waiting by the phone. You've earned freedom from the guilt and the guessing games. You've earned the right to let go of old expectations and start living for the days you have now, fresh, new, sacred. So if you've been carrying the weight of unmet hopes, of waiting for someone to change, of quietly thinking they owe you something, let this be your moment to breathe again, to choose yourself, to say, I did enough, I am enough, and I deserve peace now. Next, the fifth and final expectation, the one that clings to the soul quietly, day after day, expecting your family to fill your loneliness. Now this one, more than any other, can go unnoticed for a long time. You don't walk around saying, I feel lonely, but it shows up in the silence of your home. It shows up when the phone doesn't ring. When you pass by framed photos and remember a time when your living room was full of life, noise, and laughter. It shows up in the ache of holidays, in the pause before dinner, in the mornings that start with a sigh. Somewhere deep inside, you may have believed that as you grew older, your family would naturally stay close. That your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, they'd drop by, they'd check in, they'd make space for you in their busy lives. And when that doesn't happen, it cuts deep. You tell yourself they're busy. You make excuses for them. But when the house is quiet and the calendar's empty, the loneliness feels louder than anything else. But here's the honest truth. Your family, no matter how much they love you, cannot and should not be the only cure for your loneliness. Yes, it would be nice if they were more involved, more present, more attentive. And yes, some families do stay close and connected, but many don't. Not because they don't care, but because life has pulled them in other directions. And expecting them to fill the empty spaces in your days is a recipe for heartbreak. The world has changed. We're living in a time where adult children are juggling careers, raising their own families, managing their own struggles. And while that doesn't make it okay to forget their elders, it is a reality, one we have to face without bitterness. Because here's what no one tells you. Loneliness is not always a lack of people. Sometimes it's a lack of purpose, a lack of connection to yourself. When you place all your emotional needs in the hands of your family, you're handing over control of your happiness. And when they're absent, you feel abandoned, not because you're unloved, but because you expected something they were never designed to carry. And that's the shift we need. Not to become cold or distant, but to reclaim the ability to create joy, connection, and companionship outside of our bloodline. Start simple. Look around, not at who's missing, but at who's already there. Is there someone you've seen regularly but never spoken to? The man who walks his dog past your house? The woman who always sits alone at the library? Connection isn't always loud. Sometimes it starts with a nod, a shared smile, or a simple hello. You'd be surprised how many people are out there, just waiting for someone to break the ice. People just like you, strong, kind, a little lonely, and still full of stories to tell. And maybe it's time to pour some energy into what makes you feel alive again. A hobby, a walking group, a community garden, a senior center art class. It may feel small at first, even awkward, but tiny routines have a way of becoming the highlight of your week. And soon, you find yourself looking forward again, not just reminiscing about the past, but building a future, day by day. It's also okay to talk to yourself. Yes, really. To journal, to pray, to say out loud what's in your heart. You are still your own best companion. You've walked through life's deepest valleys and highest peaks. You know how to comfort yourself. You've done it before. You can do it again. Let go of the idea that only your children or grandchildren can make you feel seen, valued, or connected. Their love is wonderful, but it is not the only love available to you. And it is certainly not the only kind that matters. There is deep peace in creating a circle of chosen relationships, friends who check in, neighbors who care, even strangers online who understand your season of life. Love comes in many forms. Don't limit yourself to one. And here's something beautiful. The moment you stop expecting your family to cure your loneliness is the moment you start feeling lighter, more in control, more free. You stop measuring your days by who visited and start measuring them by how you showed up for yourself. You are not just a parent or a grandparent. You are not just someone's mother, father, aunt, uncle. You are you, a full person, with wisdom, with memories, with the right to be seen not only by others, but by yourself. So if today feels quiet, if the phone hasn't rung, if your chair at the family table is empty, remember this. You still matter. You still belong. And your story is far from over. Fill your life with meaning that doesn't wait on others to arrive. Fill your days with small joys, with little rituals, with moments that belong entirely to you. Because in the end, peace doesn't come from getting what you expected. It comes from loving what is. And when you let go of the expectations that keep breaking your heart, you create space for something else to grow. Acceptance, healing, joy. Even in the quiet, you can be full. Even in the stillness, you can be strong. You are not alone. Not here. Not anymore. So if this message touched something in your heart today, if you felt seen, or maybe a little less alone, I hope you'll carry that feeling with you. You don't need to fix everything. You don't need to wait for anyone to change. You only need to start choosing peace a little more each day. And if you're willing, leave a comment below. Tell me, which of these expectations have you been quietly holding on to? Which one are you ready to release? This is a space where your voice matters, and someone out there might really need to hear your story. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take good care of your heart. It's carried you through more than most people will ever know. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are forever strong. See you in the next videos.